Do you like epic games, games that tell a story? Do you look for these unique PlayStations that you'll remember for 20 years? Hello fellow gamers, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu and you're watching my series of videos where I tackle the rules of heavy games. And not only the rules, also some few basic strategies to help you feel comfortable at the game table. So here we go, it's time to overcome my delicious French accent and take a seat together in front of that heavy game box. Welcome my friends, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu. Hello to all of you, my dear heavy games lovers, and today let's tackle the rules of a not so heavy game, but a deep one. Red Flag Over Paris, published by GMT Games, a game by Fred Serval, and about la Commune de Paris, a 10-week-long bloody revolution that struck Paris in the end of the 19th century. A short game with only 45 minutes playing time, but deep enough for us to take a little time now to dive in together through its rules. Moreover, this is a game by a French designer, Fred Serval, and guess what? Fred is here just close to me, ready to introduce you to this game and more than that, ready to describe its historical background, la Commune de Paris. Hi Fred.
Hi, I'm Fred Serval, the designer of Red Flag Over Paris. Jean-Michel Grosjeu requested me to do a short historical intro for this amazing rules teach video. The year is 1871. The 5-month-long siege of Paris is finally lifted by the Prussians after a temporary armistice was signed between the invader and the Gouvernement de Défense Nationale led by Adolphe Thiers. But social tensions are rapidly escalating as it becomes obvious that the French government is accepting every demand from the newly formed German Empire to end the Franco-Prussian War. The Parisian population feels humiliated by the parade of German soldiers on the Champs-Élysées, but also infuriated by the right-wing policies implemented by Thiers' government, like the end of the debt moratorium that targets the poorest citizens. The National Guard, a temporary military contingent constituted to defend the capital during the siege, refuses to recognize the new government's authority and slowly takes control of the capital. On the 18th of March, Adolphe Thiers sends troops in Paris to attempt taking back control of the National Guard's cannons. Those cannons protected the Parisians during the siege, and they partly paid for it. It is a symbol of their resistance during the war. This is the last straw. As the people take to the street to defend their cannons, the soldiers refuse to use their rifles, and officers that order them to shoot against the population are executed without trial. This event will lead to the formation of a competing government in Paris, of socialist inspiration, called the Paris Commune. It is now up to you, the player, to see how the history will unfold.
Okay, merci Fred, and it's time now to take a look at your game. This is the game table as it looks when the game is set up. And first, let's have a look at the map. It is made of 12 spaces. They are divided in 4 colors, green, orange, blue, purple, 4 times 3 spaces. Moreover, the map is cut in 2 halves, green-orange on the left, blue-purple on the right. Green-orange is the political half. Spaces here represent ideas and ideological forces. Green spaces stand for political institutions, the National Assembly and the 2 opposite political blocs, Royalists and Republicans. Orange spaces stand for public opinion, the press, the Catholic Church and the social movements. On the other side, blue-purple is the military half. Here, spaces are actual areas in Paris or its neighborhood. Blue spaces are military forts, le Mont Valérien, le Fort d'Issy and le Château de Vincennes. Purple spaces are key areas in Paris, la Butte Montmartre, la Butte aux Cailles and le Père-Lachaise. In the game vocabulary, each color is called a crisis dimension. Among each group of 3 spaces for each color, 1 space is more important. It is depicted as a star and it is called the pivotal space for that color. As we will see, the control of this pivotal space gives some special power over all the 3 spaces of that same color. And the game of Red Flag Over Paris comes down to putting cubes into these 12 spaces. Inside a political space, green or orange, a cube is a political influence, some leverage over bureaucratic power or public opinion. Inside a military space, blue or purple, a cube is an actual troop of armed soldiers or civilians. Players control the spaces where they have a majority of cubes. At the beginning of the game, for example, the commune player controls Père Lachaise and social movement spaces. Versailles player control the royalists. And nobody controls the press space, nor all other empty spaces. Control is very important because, as we will see, that's how you earn victory points. Okay, so you put cubes into spaces in order to gain their control. But where do these cubes come from? Each player has a crisis track. This is some kind of cube reserve. The Versailles blue track holds 6 cubes. The Commune's red track, 9 cubes. This is the potential manpower that each side will unleash as their involvement in the conflict will increase. As we will see later, getting cubes from these tracks will also unlock bonus cubes located just above. Both players have also a cube pool to gather cubes that leave the map. They also both have a momentum track that shows how deep each side is involved into the civil war, from 0 to 3, each player having his own momentum cylinder. And finally, there is a track for victory points. In this game, you can earn political victory points in the political half of the map. That's why the political victory points counter is orange and green. On the victory points track, to the right, to the red side, political victory points are in favor of Commune's player. To the left, the blue side, there are victory points for Versailles. And because there is only one political victory points counter, we can say that positive victory points for Commune player are negative victory points for Versailles and vice versa. Here, for example, Commune player has 3 political victory points, while Versailles has -3. The same for military victory points, blue and purple, earned from the right half of the board. One counter for both players, Commune to the right, Versailles to the left. And voila, here is the game as it is at setup. From this point on, players will put cubes on the map by playing cards. 3 cards out of a hand of 4 every turn during 4 turns. 1, 2, 3, the 4th turn being called the Final Crisis FC on the game turn track. Okay, that was just an overview, and now let's dig together through the rules until you are actually ready to play. And first, of course, let's start with the victory conditions. What do you have to do to win this game? What are the Communes and Versailles' goals in this civil war? There are 2 kinds of goals. The first one could be called short-term goals. At the beginning of each turn, each player draws 2 objective cards and chooses one out of these 2. This is his short-term goal for the turn. The goal of each objective card is to control one specific space on the map. Here, the player must control the 4DC by the end of the turn. There are 12 objective cards in the game, one for each space on the map. And because each player draws 2 cards every turn, keeping one and discarding the other, all 12 cards will be drawn in 3 turns. No objective card at the beginning of the 4th and last turn, the Final Crisis. And so, all 12 spaces on the map will be potential objectives for one turn or the other. And this is your short-term objective. If you control this space at the end of the round, that is, if you have more cubes in this space than your opponent, you win 1 victory point. 1 political victory point if the space is green or orange, 1 military victory point if it is blue or purple. Then there is the other kind of goal, the long-term goal. With this one, you earn 1 victory point if you control all 3 spaces of the same color at the end of a round. Here, the Commune player controls all 3 spaces in the orange public opinion color. So, he earns 1 victory point, 1 political victory point, political VP for green-orange, military VP for blue or purple. And in this case, you understand that if you gain control of an entire color and keep it, you will earn 1 victory point every turn. That's why it's a long-term victory condition. Okay, but wait, there is a victory point track on the board and 2 victory point counters on it, political and military VP. When the commune player gains victory points, either political or military, the related counter moves to the right, and it moves to the left for the Versailles player. Okay, but with 2 victory point counters, how do you know who wins in the end? Here is the rule. Versailles player wins if he has more military points than commune has political points. On this example, the commune player wins with 2 political VP versus 1 military for Versailles. And beware, commune's political points count only if they are on the right side of the track, the commune side, and the same for military points for Versailles player on the left side. Here, for example, commune player wins because Versailles has no military points. The military counter is not on the Versailles side. In fact, he has kind of negative military points, the same here where Versailles player wins. And this last example where nobody wins, both players having 0 victory points because both counters being on the wrong side of the track. And nobody wins even if one could say that commune player is less negative than Versailles, but no. If your victory point counter is on the wrong side of the track, you have nothing. Commune player must earn political points, Versailles player military points. Okay, but as you can guess on this example, there can be a lot of instances where nobody wins. And so, in such cases, what do we do? If players are tied in terms of commune's political point versus Versailles military points, they check 4 secondary goals to find the actual winner. The player who wins the most of these goals is the winner. Okay, and the first goal, the first criterion, is to check victory point, but with no distinction whether military or political. In our example, if you don't mind the nature of victory points, commune player has more victory point on his side of the track than Versailles, and so commune player wins this first criterion. And only this first criterion because there are 3 others. The second criterion is to be the one who achieved the most objectives. You remember, each turn, each player draws 2 cards and secretly keeps 1. And at the end of the round, if he controls the required space on the board, he earns 1 political point or 1 military point, whether his objective is green-orange or blue-purple. But on the top of this, he just keeps the objective cards he achieved. At the end of the game, if there is a draw, the player who has the most achieved objective cards wins the second criterion. Okay, third criterion, the player who controls the most pivotal spaces at the end of the game. Easy. Pivotal spaces are the star-shaped spaces. Here, for example, commune player controls 2, while Versailles player controls only 1. This criterion goes to commune player. And finally, the fourth and last criterion, each game round starts with the determining of the initiative player, the one who will play first during all phases of this round. This is shown by the special initiative card that is flipped on its Versailles or commune side. At the end of the game, the player who is the initiative player gets this criterion. And so, in the situation where nobody wins the comparison between commune political points versus Versailles military points, the player who achieved the most secondary goals wins. And if there is still a draw, the commune player wins. And that's it. That's how you win Red Flag over Paris. That can seem a little complicated, but in a nutshell, you must control spaces, especially blue and purple military spaces if you play Versailles, green and orange political spaces if you play La Commune, and especially also the space that fit the objective card you selected for the round. And now it's time to see how the game unfolds from its beginning to its end. and when exactly victory points are earned. Every round begins with each player drawing cards, 4 strategy cards and 2 objective cards. Each player keeps all 4 strategy cards, but must choose only one objective. He discards the objective card he doesn't want, and he keeps all these cards secret. Then players determine who is the initiative player, Commune or Versailles. We will see later how it works. Then they play their strategy cards, one each starting with the initiative player. Playing a strategy card comes down to putting cubes on the game map to gain control of spaces. And players play this cycle 3 times. They play 3 cards each, 3 strategy cards out of the 4 they drew at the beginning of the round. At the end of this cycle, both players will have 1 strategy card left in hand. They will keep it for the last turn, the 4th one called the final crisis, but more on that later. Then there is a special action phase for the players who control pivotal spaces. You remember, these are the star-shaped spaces. We will see that in a moment, but what is important now is the following phase where victory points are earned for the control of 3 spaces of the same color. And after that, players reveal their secret objective and earn their victory points if they achieved it. And this is 1 round. Players play a total of 3 rounds like this, and finally they play a last 4th round that is called the final crisis, and which is slightly different from the standard round. More on that later. And here we are. Now that we got the basics, we have to dive into each of these phases and each of the game's mechanisms. And let's start with initiative. At the beginning of each round, players determine who will be the initiative player for the round. In the rulebook, it is said that the player who chooses who will get the initiative is the one with the most political victory points minus momentum. And as I suspect, knowing this formula does not give you a clear idea of what it means. Let's look at it more visually. So first, it depends on political victory points. Political, that means that initiative has nothing to do with military victory points. And because there is only 1 political VP counter for both players, the value for 1 player is the opposite of his opponent's. For example, if Versailles player has 2 political victory points, Commune's player has -2. Then you subtract momentum. We will see later how this value changes, but just know for now that it represents how far each side is involved in the civil war. 1 counter per player, 1 value per player. So, if you do the math on this example, blue player has 2, -3 equals -1, and red player, -2 minus 1 equals -3. Blue wins the initiative. Okay, but knowing all that, the formula seems even more complicated. Let's follow Jean-Michel Grosjeu and let's see what it all means with some handy visual layout. First, if political victory points are 2 or more on the red side, Commune players get the initiative. If there are 2 or more on the blue side, Versailles player gets the initiative. If political VP are 1 on red side, Commune player still get the initiative unless his momentum is 3 and Versailles is 0. So Commune gets the initiative unless his momentum is maximum while Versailles momentum is minimum. Momentum values always stays between 0 and 3. If the political VP counter is on 0, Commune gets the initiative unless its momentum is strictly greater than Versailles' momentum. And finally, if political VPs are 1 on blue side, Versailles player gets the initiative unless his momentum is 3 or 2 and La Commune's momentum is respectively 1 or 0. And that's it. Perhaps you'll find the formula more convenient or the visual layout, but the most important thing to remember is that initiative is a matter of political victory points, momentum values being used only for low political VPs. And the rule is slightly unbalanced in favor of Commune player. And the player who wins the formula can choose who gets the initiative. He doesn't have to keep the initiative for himself. For example, with a political VP of 4, commune player gets the choice and can choose to give the initiative to Versailles player. And don't forget that from now on, the so-called initiative player is not always the one who won the initiative formula, but the one who was chosen by him. Then, initiative is very important during the round. It designates who starts playing strategy cards, but also who decides in what order pivotal actions are made and victory points are scored. We will see each time how you can use initiative to your advantage. And don't forget that in the end, if players are tied on victory points, owning the initiative card is worth 1 secondary goal out of 4 when deciding who will be the winner. Okay, go on. Now that we know who is the initiative player, it's time to play the heart of the game, the strategy phase, where each player in turn plays one strategy card. Every round, each player draws 4 strategy cards. Then, during strategy phase, players play 1 card each, starting with the initiative player, until they all played 3 cards. They keep the last and 4th card face down for the last round, the final crisis. Strategy cards come in 3 colors, blue, red and grey. They all have a special event and an operational value between 1 and 3. The easiest way to play a strategy card is for its event. You just read the text on the card and do what it says. The only limitation is that you must comply with the card color. Only Versailles player can play a blue event, only commune player for red events, and grey events can be played by both players. Some actual game examples. It's Versailles player's turn. He plays this blue card for its event. The hostage decree by which the commune government decided that they would kill 3 prisoners every time Versailles would kill 1 commune partisan. An outrageous law for everyone, but especially the Catholic Church, knowing that a lot of Catholic priests were among the prisoners. In the game, the result of this event is to remove all the red cubes from the Catholic Church. By playing this event, Versailles player takes control of the Catholic Church space. After playing the event, Versailles player discards his strategy card. Next example, it's now commune player's turn. He wants to play this card for its event, Execution of Generals. The text starts with, if possible, increase Prussian collaboration. Prussian collaboration is the name of the Versailles momentum track. In our example, its value is 3, so it cannot be increased anymore, but the card says if possible, so this is not a problem. Versailles momentum stays unchanged. After that, the card says, then replace up to 2 blue cubes in the Paris space where you are present. Okay, but beware, you must pay attention to every detail of the event syntax. Replace means to remove a blue cube and add a red cube in its place. And in a Paris space means that red players cannot replace cubes from 2 different spaces. For example here, because commune player thinks that La Butte Montmartre is more important, this is Paris pivotal space, he replaces only 1 cube here and that's all. And finally, it's Versailles' turn again, and Versailles player wants to play this card for its event, Victor Hugo. He can play it because it's a grey card and both players can play grey cards events. But look, there's a prerequisite on this event. In order to play it, Versailles player must be the initiative player. Luckily, he is. Then, the text says, you must decrease both players' momentums. Here also, the syntax is very important. You must means that you cannot read further if you don't do what is written. Versailles cannot decrease commune's momentum because it is already 0. And so he cannot do this event. He cannot play this card for its event. Luckily, there are 2 other ways to play strategy cards. You can always play a card for its operational value, even if its color is your opponent's. If you play for operational value, the card stakes and color don't matter at all. And then basically you can do two things. You can remove enemy cubes from the map, or you can add your own cubes to the map. Each cube you remove or you add costs you 1 operational point. So, with 3 operational points, for example, you can remove 3 cubes, or add 3, or remove 2 and add 1, and so on. And also, all the operations you make, subtractions or additions, must be located in the same half of the map, all political or all military. Subtraction or addition are always done in this order. First you remove, second you add. As we will see very soon, this order is important. Okay, so let's see that in good order. And first, how and where you can remove enemy cubes. The first thing to do is to check what are the eligible spaces. The spaces where you can operate are those where you already have a cube, or those that are adjacent to a space you control. Control means having more cubes than your opponent. So here, blue player can operate in all these spaces where he already have a cube. Then, because he controls this space, he can also operate in both adjacent spaces. There are also two special zones that can be involved in adjacency, Versailles HQ and the Prussian occupied territories, but for the moment I would like to keep things simple, so more on that later. For now, blue player would like to use his operation points to remove red cubes from the map. There are 3 possible red cubes located in eligible spaces. Fine. With 3 operational points, Versailles player can remove them all, but no. Remember, all operations must be located in the same half of the map, political or military. Versailles player chooses to remove the cube in the National Assembly and that's all, he cannot remove any other cube. But wait, I hear you thinking, now that Versailles player removed the red cube from the National Assembly, he took the control of this space. So now he can operate in any adjacent space and then he can remove this other red cube in the Republican space. No, he cannot do that, and for 2 reasons. First, because eligible spaces are checked before removing any cubes, and it is not checked again during the process of removing opponent cubes, so you cannot snowball cubes removal. And in this example, there is a second reason, and that is because these 2 spaces are not adjacent, at least not this way. Look at the arrow. It shows that adjacency is correct from the Republican space to the National Assembly, but not the opposite way. There are 2 such one-way arrows around the National Assembly. Other arrows in the political half of the map are 2 ways. In the military half, there are white paths instead of arrows. White paths are the same as 2 ways arrows. They work both ways. Okay, removing cubes is quite easy. For 1 operational point from your strategy card, you remove 1 cube. Yes, but it's that easy only in the political half of the board, where cubes are IDs or influence. Easy to swap, easy to change, but on the military half, cubes are men with guns and they are much more difficult to remove. To remove an opponent cube in the military half of the board, you must win a battle. And first, this battle has an operational cost. You must spend 1 operational point from your strategy card to remove 1 cube, the same as for political half. But you must also gather military strength point. You get 1 strength point if you have at least 1 cube in the battle space, that is, the space where the opponent cube you want to remove is located. If Versailles player wants to remove the red cube from La Butte Montmartre, he has 1 strength point because he has 1 blue cube in the space. He doesn't get more points for having 2 cubes. No, only 1 point for 1 cube or more. Then, 1 more strength point if you control the battle space, so if you have more cube in the battle space than your opponent. Here, Versailles player controls La Butte Montmartre space with 2 blue cubes versus 1 red, so he gets 1 more strength point. And finally, 1 strength point per adjacent space you control. If you control more than 1 adjacent space, you get more than 1 strength point. Versailles player controls La Butte aux Cailles, which is an adjacent space, so he gets +1 strength point. If the player gathers 3 strength points or more, he removes the cubes he targeted. Here, the red cube in La Butte Montmartre is removed. Okay, but this costs only 1 operational point. Versailles player played this Victor Hugo strategy card for 3 operational points. So, he has 2 more to spend. He can try to remove the 2 red cubes from the Père Lachaise. Let's do the math. 1 strength point for having a blue cube in Père Lachaise space. He does not control this space, so no bonus for control, but he controls 2 adjacent spaces that give him +1 bonus twice. For a total of 3 strength points, that's okay, he can remove 1 red cube. Then, with his last operational point, he removes the last cube. Okay, that was very efficient, and for 3 operational points, Versailles player removed 3 red cubes. Let's go back to the beginning of our example, and let's see what happens if it's Commune's player turn. Commune player plays that same card for 3 operational points, and he wants to remove blue cubes from the map. Let's start with Le Père Lachaise. Red player has 1 strength point for having at least 1 cube in the space. Then, 1 more point for controlling the space, and that's all. He doesn't control any adjacent space. He has 2 strength points and no 1 more. So, what can he do? He needs 3 strength points to remove the blue cube. Luckily, he can get 1 more point by spending 1 more operational point from his strategy card. So, by spending 2 operational points instead of 1, he can gather 3 strength points and remove the blue cube. Now, the Commune player has 1 operational point left from his strategy card, and he wants to remove the lone cube in La Butte aux Cailles. He has no red cube in the space, he doesn't control the space, of course, he has only 1 strength point for controlling an adjacent space, and he cannot spend any bonus operation point because he has only 1 left. So, only 1 strength point, it's not enough, but still, he can try his luck. War, after all, is often a matter of luck. In such a case, the player draws a card from the strategy deck and he checks the operational value of this card. If it is lower or equal than the number of his strength points, he wins the battle. Here, Commune player drew a 1 value card, so it's a success, and he removes the blue cube with only 1 strength point. Okay, now you know how to handle these rules and how to maneuver on the military half of the game map, where you need to conquer spaces and circle your opponent. But remember, by playing a strategy card for its operational value, you can remove opponent's cube, but you can also add your own to the map. This one is much easier. With 1 operational point, you can add 1 cube of your own in any eligible space. As before, an eligible space is any space where you already have a cube or a space adjacent to one you control. In our example, Versailles player plays this strategy card for operational value. It is a red card, but for operational value, color doesn't matter. 2 operational points, he can add 2 blue cubes, 1 in a space he already controls and 1 in an adjacent space. Note that he could not have added a cube in Republican space because it is not adjacent to the National Assembly. This is a one-way arrow. Don't forget that he cannot add cubes both in political half and military half of the board. He must choose. And for adding cubes, things are as easy on both halves. With this same strategy card, Versailles player could choose to add cubes to the military side. 1 cube in La Butte Montmartre because he already has cube there, and 1 cube in La Butte aux Cailles because he controls an adjacent space. And note how easy it was. No strength point, no math, no random draw. 1 point for 1 cube and that's all. It is much easier for Versailles player to take control of La Butte Montmartre by adding a blue cube than by removing a red cube. The problem is that each player can have a maximum of 4 cubes per space. So once both players have 4 cubes in a space, The only way to gain control is to remove your opponent's cube. And moreover, as we will see soon, cubes can become scarce, making the addition of new cubes much more difficult. Fine, you know how to use the operational value of strategy cards to remove opponent cubes and to add your own. And this is instead of playing the event and whatever the color of the card. A few more words before going on. You cannot snowball the addition of your cubes. With the 2-value strategy cards, Versailles player can add a cube in the press space, but not in the social movement space, because this one was not adjacent to a control space at the beginning of the phase. You cannot take advantage of a space you just conquered by adding a cube at the same phase. But, that being said, you can chain the addition of your cubes after the removal of opponent's cubes. In other words, you check eligible spaces once again just before adding cubes. In this example, Versailles player would like to attack La Butte Montmartre. It's the beginning of his turn. He plays a 3-value card. He cannot add any cube to La Butte Montmartre because he doesn't control any adjacent space. So, first, he tries to remove a red cube from La Butte aux Cailles. This space is eligible because Versailles player has a blue cube in it. In order to remove opponent's cubes in the military half of the board, Versailles player needs strength points. He has 1 because he has cubes in the space, plus 1 for controlling an adjacent space, and that's all. He decides to spend 1 more operational point to reach the 3 strength points he required to avoid the draw of a card. And now, Versailles player has 1 operational point left. And before adding cubes, he checks eligibility once again. And now, La Butte Montmartre is eligible because adjacent to a space he controls. He can add a blue cube in it. Note that operations always occur in this order. First, you remove opponent cubes, then you add yours. You cannot do the other way. In other words, once you add a cube, you cannot remove anymore. Note also that you cannot remove your own cubes. That can seem strange, but as we will see, your own cubes can become scarce, and sometimes you would like to take them back from the map. But no, you can only remove your opponent's cubes. And finally, we must talk about some special spaces on the map. First, there are 2 red flag symbols. In both these spaces, there is a permanent commune presence. That means that these 2 spaces are always eligible for commune player for removing or adding cubes. And that means that Versailles player can never expel commune player from either political or military board. Commune player can always add a cube in these 2 spaces. A French Republic symbol has the same use for Versailles player in the royalist space. But things are little different on the military battlefield. Versailles player has a special Versailles headquarters zone. This zone is not playable. No cube, neither blue nor red, can be put there. But for Versailles player and for eligibility purposes, this zone is adjacent to Mont Valérien and Fort d'Issy. That means that Mont Valérien and Fort d'Issy are both permanent entry points for Versailles player who can there add blue cubes or remove red cubes. There is a second such zone to the north, the Prussian occupied territory. It is not playable, but it is, for eligibility purposes, permanently adjacent to Père-Lachaise and Château de Vincennes. The point here is that this zone and its adjacency is usable only if Versailles momentum is 3. This simulates that when negotiations between France and Prussia were advanced enough, Versailles could recover troops from the Eastern Front in order to fight Paris insurgency. Okay, players with event cards or with operation points remove and add cubes to the game board. And it's time now to understand where all these cubes come from and where they go to when they are removed. Okay, if you remember the very beginning of this video, here is where game pieces are at game setup, and especially red and blue cubes. Both players have the same total number of cubes, 18. Versailles player starts with 2 cubes in spaces, royalist and press. Commune player starts with 3 cubes in spaces, press, social movements and Père Lachaise. All other cubes are in reserve, ready to enter the game. In fact, these reservist cubes can be located in 3 different areas. First, the crisis tracks. There are 2 of them, one for each player. These are the main cube sources for the players. This is where the new cubes are waiting to be brought into the battle. Then there are the pools. Blue and red pools are not symmetrical. They don't work the same way, but they both have the same purpose. This is where cubes go when they are removed from the map. This is where they wait before going back to the battle. And finally, there are bonus cubes. Both players have bonus cubes over their crisis tracks, and Versailles player has some more under his momentum track. Okay, and now how does it all work? Let's look at the blue side first, Versailles. Whenever blue player needs cubes to add to a space, whether it is by playing an event or by spending operational points, he takes the cubes from his cube pool. The cube pool is always the source for cubes. Okay, but at the beginning of the game, the cube pool is empty. And so, whenever the cube pool is empty, the player takes his cubes from the crisis track. So, let's say it's the beginning of the game, and Versailles player plays this card, Jules Ferry, for its event. He can put 2 blue cubes on the Republican space. He needs 2 blue cubes. His cube pool is empty, so he takes these 2 cubes from his crisis track. On the blue crisis track, cubes are always taken from the right to the left. In fact, the rule is from the center of the board to the outside. That gives from left to right for red player and from right to left for blue player. Thus, from right to left, 2 cubes to be added to the map. 1, 2, very simple. The crisis track is divided into 4 columns. The first one has no name. It is when there is no crisis at all at the beginning of the game. Then we just removed 1 cube from the second column, escalation. As soon as a cube is removed from a column, this column is unlocked. Escalation is now the new crisis level. And as soon as a new column is unlocked, its bonus cubes are released. On top of the escalation column, there is 1 bonus cube. A bonus cube is always released to the cube pool. A bonus cube is never added directly to the map. Bonus cubes always go to the cube pool. Another card, so I'm sure you understand. Blue player plays this card, les brassardiers, for the event. He must replace a red cube with a blue cube on the map, so he needs a blue cube. Cubes always come first from the cube pool. There is a cube in the pool, so this is where blue player takes his cube from. Next turn, blue player plays this card for its operational value. With 3 points, he wants to add 3 cubes to the map. The cube pool is empty, so he takes his cube from the crisis track. 1, 2. When taking the second cube, blue player unlocks the next column, tension. This releases a bonus cube, but bonus cubes never go directly to the map, so the last cube that blue player needs must come from the crisis track again. This unlocks the last column and releases 2 more bonus cubes. To avoid any mistake, you should wait until you have completed all the card's effect before moving bonus cubes to the cube pool. Okay, this is what happens when cubes must be added to the map. But how does it work when cubes are removed? Where do they go? Commune player plays a card for its operation value and remove 2 blue cubes from the map. Easy. These cubes go to blue player's cube pool. Removed cubes always go to the cube pool. And from then, they become available again and can be added back to the map with the play of another strategy card. And that's it. That's how cubes are handled. Versailles player has another source of bonus cubes just under his momentum track. These work like regular bonus cubes. Every time he increases his momentum to a new level, we will see just after how it can happen, he releases bonus cubes. and these cubes go to the cube pool because bonus cubes always go to the cube pool. There is no limit to the number of cubes inside the blue cube pool. Okay, that was for blue player. For red player, things are very close but still noticeably different. Red commune player doesn't have the same cube pool as blue player. Red cube pool is linked to red momentum track, and this cube pool does not have an infinite capacity like blue's. At the beginning of the game, when red momentum is 0, red cube pool has no capacity at all. It cannot hold any cube. So, if red player plays this event and decides to add 4 cubes to the map, his cube pool being empty, he takes his cubes from his crisis track 1, 2, 3, 4, but doing so, he unlocked a new column in his crisis track, escalation, and he released 2 bonus cubes. These 2 bonus cubes should go to the cube pool, but because there is no free room in the pool, these 2 cubes have nowhere to go. They are eliminated, out of play. If later in the game, blue player removes 1 red cube from a space, common player must put it in his cube pool, but with no available room, this cube is also lost. If a red player increases his momentum, we will see very soon how to do that, I promise. It unlocks 2 slots in the cube pool. So now, if commune player adds 2 cubes to the map, he takes them from his crisis track, he unlocks a new column, tension, and releases 2 bonus cubes. But now, he has enough room to welcome them in his cube pool. From then, red cube pool works exactly like blue's. Now, if a cube must be added to the map, it comes from the pool, always the pool first. Blue cube pool has an infinite size and can hold as many cubes as you want. Red cube pool can hold 0, 2, 3 or 4 cubes depending on its momentum. Cubes in excess are lost, out of the game. Okay, let's try to make it simple in one condensed diagram. Players need cubes to take control of spaces on the map. At the beginning of the game, the only cubes you can get are from your crisis track. Then, cubes that are removed from the map go to your cube pool. They never go back to the crisis track. And from then, when you need more cubes to add to the map, you take them from the cube pool. Your cube pool is your running cube supply. Only when it happens that your cube pool is empty, you take cubes from your crisis track. As you remove cubes from your crisis track, you unlock bonus cubes. And these cubes go to your cube pool. Bonus cubes never go directly to the map. Blue player also gets bonus cubes from his momentum track, and for blue Versailles player it is pretty much it, because he has an infinite size cube pool from the beginning of the game. For red commune player, things are a little bit more difficult. His cube pool size depends on his momentum, from 0 at the beginning to 4. And when there is no more empty slots in his pool, extra cubes are lost, out of the game, whether they come from bonuses or removed from the map. And now, as I promised, at last, it's time to look at momentum. There are 2 momentum tracks, here in the center of the board, one for each player. Each player has his own momentum counter. It starts at 0 and goes up to 3, to the right for the commune player, to the left for Versailles. At the beginning of the game, there are 6 bonus cubes under Versailles' momentum track. As soon as Versailles' momentum increases to 1, it releases 1 bonus cube that goes to his cube pool. When momentum goes up to 2, it releases 2 more bonus cubes, but also this symbol shows that commune player can immediately add a cube to any orange space. This simulates that pushing the collaboration with the Prussian invader is frowned upon by public opinion. Commune player chooses where to put the cube regardless of presence or adjacency. Then, at the highest momentum value, 3 bonus cubes are released, 1 more commune cube goes to any orange space, red player's choice, and there will be a bonus of 1 military victory point for Versailles at the end of the game. Note this victory point is not earned now. Blue momentum counter can still go down, and the victory point is earned only if momentum is 3 at the end of the game. Note also that if momentum increases again, it gives again a free cube to red player to be added in an orange space. And remember that a Versailles momentum of 3 unlocks the Prussian occupied territory on the map and the adjacency toward Père-Lachaise and Château de Vincennes. Now let's see the right side of the track, red commune momentum. When red momentum increases to 1, it doesn't release any bonus cubes. Instead, it opens 2 slots in red player's cube pool. Red momentum level 2, 1 more slot for the cube pool, and Versailles player can immediately put a cube in any green space of his choice. This simulates that as Paris' population becomes more engaged in the revolution, political institutions start to worry. Blue player chooses any green space regardless of presence or adjacency. Red momentum level 3, 1 more slot, 1 more blue cube to a green space, and +1 bonus political victory point for commune player at the end of the game. Okay, momentum is important for both players, and with its victory point bonus, it can be considered as one of the goals of the game. But how do you increase it? Easy. When it is your turn to play, you throw away one of your strategy cards, regardless of its color or its operational value, and you increase your momentum by 1. Some events also can change momentum values. Okay, and you could ask, why do you say throw away any card and not discard? Because this is not the same. Let's summarize all the ways to play a card. When it's your turn, you can play a card for its event, and in this case, your card goes to the discard pile. You can play it for its operational value, to remove opponent cubes and add yours to the map, and discard it also. And as we just saw, you can throw away a card to increase your momentum, and in this last case, the card is out of play. Why make this distinction? Because of the fourth action you can do on your turn. You can discard a card from your hand to retrieve and play the event of the top card of the discard pile. The card from your hand that you discard must have an operational value greater or equal than the card you retrieve. For example, this is red player's hand, and he plays this card, Le Figaro, for its operational value. Then, it's blue player's turn. He can retrieve the top discarded card by discarding this card, for example, whose operational value is greater or equal. Then he plays the event of the retrieved card, Le Figaro. And so that means that every time you play a card of your opponent's color, you should pay attention that he could use its event the next round. And that's why the momentum action can be useful. If you own a card of your opponent's color, but it is powerful and you don't want him to be able to retrieve it, you can play it to increase your momentum, and then the card will be removed from the game and it will be impossible for your opponent to retrieve it. Okay, we know all about strategy cards, when, how, and why you play them. Everyone, both players play 3 strategy cards, adding and removing cubes on the map. And then, it's time for the players to look at the consequences of what they have done. It's time to consolidate. It's time to take profits. First, consolidate. In each color, what the game calls a crisis dimension, the player who controls the pivotal space, the star-shaped space, gets a bonus action to consolidate his presence in this colored zone. For example, in this in-game situation, Versailles player controls 2 pivotal spaces, the green one and the blue one. Commune player controls the purple one, and nobody controls the orange one. So there will be 2 pivotal actions for Versailles player and 1 for commune player. This is the initiative player who chooses in what order pivotal actions are made. Here, the initiative player is the commune player, and he decides to start with blue spaces Because he wants to see what Versailles player will do there before deciding what to do in purple spaces. The player who controls the pivotal space gets a bonus action he can do only in the 3 same colored spaces. It is a bonus action because the player doesn't have to spend any strategy card to do it. And this action is not bound to any rule of presence or adjacency. That being said, the Versailles player chooses between 3 possible bonus actions in the blue spaces. First possible action, turncoat. He replaces any opponent cube by one of his own. Here, it allows him to take control of the 4DC, and so you understand how powerful these pivotal actions are. This replacement is far easier than it should have been by playing a strategy card. No presence, no adjacency required, no strength points. Next, initiative common player decides he will do his own pivotal action in purple spaces. He chooses the second available action, de-escalate. He can remove 2 of his own cubes from spaces of that same color, or 1 of his own cubes plus 1 opponent cube. Here, he removes the Versailles cube to regain control of La Butte-aux-Cailles, then 1 red cube from Père Lachaise because he feels confident here and wants to increase his available cube in his cube pool. This is important because sometimes a player can end up with a larger number of cubes in one space and need to get some of them back to his cube pool. And finally, for green spaces, blue player chooses the last possible pivotal action, spread influence. Of course, he could have chosen one of the 2 other actions. I show you the 3 different actions on purpose for the sake of the example. With spread influence, blue player can move 2 of his own cubes between same colored spaces. Here, green spaces. And so he takes advantage of this action to take control of all green spaces. And what is key with these pivotal actions is that as soon as they are done, players score their victory points for the control of crisis dimensions, so the control of colored zones. 1 victory point when a player controls all 3 spaces of a given color. Versailles player gets 1 political VP for controlling all 3 green spaces, and common player gets 1 military victory point for controlling all 3 purple spaces. No VP for orange or blue spaces that are not fully controlled by any player. And note that neither player did control these crisis dimensions before their pivotal action. So you must understand how important these pivotal actions are in your strategy and how important is the control of pivotal star-shaped spaces. And now we are very close to the end of the round and it's time to check if players reached their objectives. Remember, back at the beginning of the round, both players drew 2 objective cards and choose 1. Now they both reveal what objective they had and they check if they reached it. Versailles' objective was to control the royalist green space. That's okay for him. Commune objective was to control the social movement orange space, and that's also a success. Both objectives being political, green and orange, they both move the political marker, 1 VP for Versailles, 1 VP for La Commune, both cancel each other out. And then, after scoring, each objective achieved gives a special bonus action. This action is written on the card. Versailles player can spend 2 operational points immediately in green spaces, or he can remove any 1 cube of any color anywhere. That's very powerful comparing to pivotal actions, because pivotal actions stay inside their color, while this objective bonus action allows to remove a cube in any colored space. He chooses to remove red cube in La Butte-aux-Cailles. Common player objective bonus action is to spend 2 operational points in orange spaces, then to increase or decrease his own momentum. Note that spending 2 operational points means that he must comply with all the related rules. Let's say here, he removes a blue cube in the press space and adds 1 of his own. He cannot add any cube in a green space because his objective action text on the card requires orange spaces. Then he increases his momentum. Both players keep the objective cards they achieved because remember, they will count toward victory in case of a draw. Okay, note also that the order of objective bonus actions can be important, and in such case, of course, the initiative player decides who goes first. We saw many instances in which initiative is important, and I think it's time to summarize them all. Remember, at the beginning of each round, initiative is based on current political VPs, and this determines which player chooses who will be the initiative player. Then, this designated initiative player will go first when both players alternate playing strategy cards. After they played 3 cards each, game goes to pivotal actions where initiative player decides in which order pivotal spaces bonus actions are performed. Then players compute their scores for spaces control and then again for their objectives. And each time, initiative player decides in which order. And here you can ask why order matters when computing victory points. In fact, it matters because victory points track is not open-ended. Victory points never go over 5. Here, political victory points are on the 5 space in favor of the commune player. It is the end of the round and both players earned 1 political VP. Let's suppose Versailles player is the initiative player. He chooses in which order points are scored. So, he chooses commune point first, but because the VP counter cannot increase anymore, nothing happens. Then Versailles point is scored, and voila, they both had 1 victory point, but the counter did decrease thanks to the initiative privilege. Finally, initiative player chooses in which order objective bonus actions are played. And, of course, the player who has initiative at the end of the game earns 1 point more when resolving a tiebreaker situation. And so, this is initiative, and you can see how important it is at every stage of the game sequence. Okay, go on. You know how to play round 1, round 2, round 3, but what about this special 4th round that is called the Final Crisis? This 4th round is played just as the other rounds, but with some exceptions. First, no strategy cards are dealt at the beginning of the Final Crisis, and no objective cards either. And because there are no objective cards, there are no objective victory points nor special actions at the end of the round. The whole Final Crisis special round is played with the strategy cards players put aside during previous rounds. Remember, every regular round, 4 cards are dealt, but only 3 are actually played. So, every regular round, each player keeps 1 card aside. He keeps it to be used during the Final Crisis round. Moreover, each player has his own special Final Crisis strategy card from the beginning of the game. 1 special FC card each. Maréchal MacMahon for Versailles player and Charles de l'Écluse for commune player. And hopefully both players should keep their FC card until the end, until the Final Crisis round, where they will add this card to their hand. We will see very soon that players can play their FC card instead of keeping it until the Final Crisis. But for the moment, let's keep it simple. And let's suppose both players kept their FC card, and so at the beginning of round 4, that is the Final Crisis round, they have 4 cards in hand, just like for a regular round, but they have not drawn any. And then they play the Final Crisis as a regular round. Initiative, then they play 3 strategy cards, 1 each turn, including their special FC card they can play like any other card. The great difference here being that during the Final Crisis, strategy cards can only be played for their event. In this example, blue player can add 2 cubes to the press space or replace any red cube in an orange space. And he cannot do anything else with this card. He cannot use its operational value. And if his current problem is a tug of war with the common player in a purple space, this card cannot help at all. And this is the uniqueness of this Final Crisis round. It is kind of scripted. During all the previous 3 rounds, you put cards aside, 1 per round, and these cards' events are the plan that you will unfold during Final Crisis. If the event is not eligible, for example here, if you are Versailles player and you are not the initiative player, nothing happens. You can play the card, but it is useless. And if the card is your opponent's color, he can choose to do the event for himself, as if he just played it himself. And you can play your Final Crisis special card for its event. This event is quite powerful and it is often a good idea to keep this card until the Final Crisis. Okay, and still, don't forget that you will play only 3 cards during Final Crisis. So, you still have some choice, and if you have a bad card in your hand, you are not bound to use it. And that's it for the Final Crisis. After each player played 3 cards, game goes on to the pivotal bonus action, then the scoring for controlling 3 same-colored spaces. There is no scoring for objectives, because there are no objectives during the Final Crisis. And so you should complain that there are less victory points to earn during this special round. But no, remember, because this is the last round, this is the moment where both players earn 1 victory point if they reached their highest momentum value. And so, one could say that for the Final Crisis round, both players' objective is to reach a momentum of 3. And now, just 2 more things about the Final Crisis. And to begin with, each player gets his own Final Crisis card at the beginning of the game. Usually, they keep their card until the Final Crisis round, when they can play it for its event. But players can also choose to play their Final Crisis card before that as a regular strategy card during a regular round. In such a case, the FC card can only be played for its operational value, so to remove and add cubes on the map. After being played, the FC card is out of the game and the player must discard any other strategy card from his hand. With its 4 operational value, the FC card can be a great help during a regular round, but keep in mind that if you play your FC card like this, you will start the Final Crisis round with only 3 strategy cards and no FC card. Okay, and finally, let's see how a Final Crisis can break out sooner than expected. Usually, and if nothing special happens, the Final Crisis round is the 4th round. But players, by their actions, can cause an early Final Crisis. Remember, during the game, when they need, players take their new cubes from their crisis tracks. Let's see with Versailles player. As soon as he takes his second cube, he opens a new stage in the crisis, escalation. And this releases a bonus cube, we already knew that. Then he goes on, playing more and more strategy cards and taking more cubes from his tracks. He unlocks the next stage, Tension, and finally, he unlocks the last stage, Final Crisis. And here is what happens. Because Versailles player is the first to reach this last Final Crisis stage on his crisis track, he gains the 2 bonus cubes and he loses 1 political victory point. And the other player, here the commune player, loses the 2 bonus cubes linked to his own Final Crisis stage. And so you understand the gamble. The first player to reach his own Final Crisis stage loses 1 political point, but gains 2 bonus cubes his opponent will never have. And if both players reach their Final Crisis stage, this launches an early Final Crisis. Next turn, we'll jump right to the Final Crisis round without playing the remaining regular rounds. If both players reached their Final Crisis stage during round 2, for example, the Final Crisis round would be the 3rd one. And during this Final Crisis round, players play a number of strategy cards equal to the number of regular rounds previously played. Usually it's 3 cards for 3 rounds, but here, in this example, players would play only 2 strategy cards. And that's it, you know all the rules, but one little piece of chrome. Before we part, we have still to talk about barricades and fortifications. They are the same cylinder wooden pieces, but with different names. Barricades for commune player, fortifications for Versailles player. Each player has 2 such pieces, and they can put them on the map only by playing a card, a strategy card event, or an objective card special bonus action. If, for example, blue player wins this objective at the end of a round, he adds a fortification in le fort DC. A fortification cylinder, or a barricade, is just like a cube. It counts as 1 cube, but it doesn't count toward the limit of 4 cubes per space. So you can have 4 cubes and 1 fortification in the same space. A fortification, of course, as any cube, cannot move. A fortification protects the cubes in its space, and it does it in 2 ways. First, it costs 2 operational points instead of 1 for the opponent to add a cube in its space. Here, red player with an operational value of 2 can just add 1 cube in 4DC. And it costs also 2 operational points to remove a cube in an opponent fortification space. Here, with a 2 points card, common player can remove only 1 cube in 4DC. But look, he has 1 strength point for having a red cube in battle space, plus 1 strength for controlling an adjacent space, but because he must spend all his 2 operational points due to the blue fortification, he cannot spend 1 more point to get the 3rd strength he would like. And so, he must draw a card to check if he wins the battle. Let's say he draws a 2-value card, high enough to win and remove an opponent cube. He must remove a blue cube because you can remove a cylinder, fortification or barricade only if it is the last piece left in the space. And voila how barricades and fortifications can be of great help to build an actual defense stronghold. And congratulations, you are now ready to play a game of Red Flag over Paris by yourself. You'll find my handy player aid on BoardGameGeek's dedicated page, free to download, free to use, free to forward to your friends. Thank you to all of you who support my channel on Patreon or on Utip. Your help is very valuable to me and it drives me to always try to do better. I'll see you at the next game. Merci les amis, c'était Jean-Michel Grosjeu.